Hello and welcome back to the Those Coffee People podcast, coming to you from Medellin, Colombia. We've got a great episode for you today. I'm joined by Jonathan from Absolute Bearing Coffee, based out of Mystic, Connecticut. In this conversation, we're going to explore the ins and out of roasting, the nuances and flavors in cups from all over the world, what that one cup moment means in specialty coffee, and more on Jonathan's story with Absolute Bearing. Let's get into it. Jonathan, welcome.
Well, thank you. This is great. Glad we can talk about our favorite thing, which is coffee.
Yes, absolutely. Before we get started, we'd love to hear a little bit of an introduction about yourself and about your roasting business.
Okay, so Absolute Bearing Coffee Company was founded in 2020. This was on the heels of COVID. Had finished in the Navy, retired in 2016, went and worked for Electric Boat and Pratt and Whitney for a couple of years, and then decided to go full time into coffee roasting. We've been roasting coffee since 2008 when I was in the Navy, and that's when it kind of grabbed hold of me and said this is something that I wanted to do. And this is where we are now, full time, a couple of years later, and we're really excited about where we're going and what we're doing.
Amazing. Well, I know in our conversations before this, you were telling me a little bit more about your background and about how you came into specialty coffee. And that was something that just stuck with me so much. And I think it's one of the most under-named or under-titled situations that happen in coffee, which is that one cup moment. I'd love to hear that story, and I think our listeners would love to hear a little bit more about it as well. Could you tell us more about that one cup that turned you into specialty
Yeah, that
coffee?
one cup was 2008. That's when we started. Was I was in the Navy and I went to a school up in Massachusetts for thermal imaging. And while I was there was a guy who home roasted, and he had a little Solus automatic, semi-automatic machine. And I used to need lots of creamer and everything inside my coffee because submarine coffee was terrible. And so he had it, he brought it in, he put it in there. He just asked everyone, "Hey, give me 50 cents for the coffee." So I ran it through the machine, and it was the most delicious cup of, like, it just had the right amount of crema, and it was sweet. And I don't even know if it was it was just delicious. And I asked him, I was like, "Hey, how did you do that? Where'd you get that from?" And he said, "Well, I home roasted." He started on a little machine, and so we kind of got the bug from there. And that was the first time, moving forward, that we decided, okay, let's go and try this on our level and see what we can do. And then we got to a place where we're having people try it, and we decided that from that point onward, from that cup, right, and that's the explanation we give everyone when we do farmers markets. That was the cup that set everything else in motion for Absolute Brand Coffee.
I love it. I love that story. And I love, hearing about people expressing their one cup moment, that cup that you said, oh, this is what coffee
Yeah,
can taste
yeah,
like.
it was. And you know what's funny? Like, you don't think about it until someone asks you, and you're like, "Oh, that's the one," right? And that was the one. Whenever we go out, we tell people, I'm like, it was that moment. And yeah, it just grabs you, and then it says, "Let's see what else is out there."
Oh, amazing. And then from that moment, I bet it's just down the rabbit hole. With us coffee nerds, that's what we go into. We start learning one thing and then another and then another. And then we get into talking about sweetness and balance and all of these different notes and all of these different origins. I'd love to know more about your perspectives on that. Tell me a little bit more about roasting for you and about maybe your journey throughout different origins and different tasting notes that you've discovered within this experience.
So we didn't really know what we were doing. We had no idea what we were doing. So we'd go to Royal and we'd buy a bag of coffee, and it was really expensive. And we're like, okay, let's go try it out. And literally we were roasting on, at that moment, an arcade drum. So a barbecue grill with a rotating rotisserie, dumping it out at 650 degrees into a homemade cooler. But that's where we started to kind of learn how the different nuances of, sometimes you get like a butterscotch flavor over here or a smell, and that'll tell you that this thing is doing this over here. But we didn't really start to hone that in until we got our Ambex, and then was able to really see the roasts real time on your profiler. And then that's one gave us more insight into when things were happening, when they weren't happening. And so we started with a lot of the South American coffees. We came we really liked Sumatra in the beginning. It's a harder bean to roast, to lower temperature, all that kind of stuff. But the body that it provided was just phenomenal. And so we moved through Indonesian coffees, far Asia coffees. And then right now where we've been looking is more of the experimentals, just because the different flavors that are in there is just off the charts. And so we have a Riest. So using the Riest to profile it for us, so we can find out that one temperature where it's locked in, so that we can try to mimic it on the Ambex, has been where we are now. And I don't say we're challenged by it, but it's to get that many varieties plus having your baseline coffees that you produce all the time. you have to buy a smaller amount and then really kind of hone it in before you can decide this is where I want this to be. And so that's where we are in our coffee roasting journey. What, 5 years later? So
How exciting and how nice to be able to, continue and explore and develop on that. Now, you mentioned something interesting about the different processes and how you can have all these different options on top of maybe like your standard options that, are the bread and butter. How is it being a roaster in your region? How do you feel the market is growing and adapting in your specific area to these unique and funky coffees? Or how do you communicate this with the wider market?
yeah, so we started with about a year ago. We started with B specialty coffee. So it was a geisha, pink bourbon, lactic acid process, and a honey process. This is the first time we got it. And so the way we explained it to it was a light roast. So light roast tends to get people kind of locked in that there's something different about it. Not all the time, but that seems to be the way. So light roast, smaller amount because it was more expensive, so it gets them into their price range. But then just to also give out samples. So when we have people who normally come in for their regular, we'd say, "Hey, try this," and then they would be like, "That's amazing. Let me try that." We found that that is an easier way to introduce people to these new coffees. A lot of people don't know what they are. Like what we really find is when we go out and we do a lot of selling, is that the majority of the people around here, those things are new. And so trying to explain to them what it does to the coffee, and then how it translates to taste, is it's not difficult. It's an education that you have to give your consumer, and it teaches us better how to explain it to people, especially if we have two coffees side by side. One's a natural process, one's a fully washed, and then they drink it and they try it. If it's from the same region, they can say, I can tell a difference. I can tell a difference from that. And so that's where we have found the most traction with getting other people to try these different types.
Okay, exciting. And yes, what a journey this is going to be. And I'm sure it's probably a task that is never going to just finish one day. It's always going to be something that's a
Yep.
work in progress. And even as the coffee industry grows and expands and new offers come into play or new trends enter the market, it's just going to continue to be a learning cycle.
Yeah. Well, and not only that, but what we've also found is so a lot of people, I shouldn't say a lot, but we find a group of our customers, they've had some kind of flavored coffee, meaning like hazelnut, toasted marshmallow, something like whatever, right? But what we found is that we can manipulate the coffee to where like we use a lactic acid process, Colombian fully washed, but also a Komodo dragon light roast. And when you put those two things together, it literally tastes like a chocolate covered strawberry. And so that's the only way to, like, I explain, people go, "What is it?" I go, "It's chocolate strawberry." And I'm like, "Well, what flavors do you put into it?" We're like, "It's none. It's just the coffee." And that's the amazing thing that we love about coffee is that God provided this berry that now has these seeds in it, and you can change all these different flavors. And then from one to the other, it's amazing. And then be able to draw that to a person so they can be like, I can really taste that, and get them excited about those things too.
I love it. I love what you said is what's the flavor? It's coffee flavor.
Yeah, it's just
This
coffee.
is
There's
what
no,
coffee can
we get
taste
that all the
like.
time. They're like, "No, you must flavor it." We're like, "No, we don't flavor. It's just the natural flavor of that coffee. That's just what it is." And that's why I love it. Because sometimes you get it and you're like, "I wasn't expecting that." This sounds great. Yeah.
So exciting. And I guess that kind of also probably loops into our first discussion was about that first cup. Maybe that was someone's first cup moment where they said, no, really, this is what coffee can taste
Yep.
like.
Yep.
Beautiful to be able to be a part of that story with others as well. When we were having our initial discussion, we were going into some topics about coffee scenes across the US. So, for example, you are in a summer town in Connecticut, which could have a very different coffee scene than a major hub like the Bay Area or even maybe New York City to a degree. I'm wondering if you've identified any sorts of like trends or experiences that you might be able to share about these different markets and what you think it means for the specialty coffee industry.
I don't specifically to like any trends. I mean, we're a coffee roaster. We're not a coffee shop. So we go to other coffee shops to try them out to see if we fit with them or if we're not. I don't really know. I mean, like, so we have a customer that comes online during the summertime, and it's a dark Italian roasted type of coffee. They love it out there, and then it goes away, and then they come back for the next season. I don't think we've really seen any trends. I think right now the I think mostly it's like if you go to the grocery store, right? The thing that I look at is you go to the grocery store, and yes, we have an influx of people, but you have a wall of coffee. And so what we're so what we're trying to do is to get out there in front of those other people to be like, hey, you have these other options. We do find people who come into. We also run Airbnb, so they'll have our coffee there, and then they'll try it, and then they'll either go and buy it or they don't. I don't think there's anything specifically. I mean, mostly what we found was a lot of people around here really like this double roasted, really dark and oily. And it's just we've told people that we're like we can't roast like that, and we don't want to roast like that. And mostly what it came from was there was a roaster here, and they had a civet machine, and so it roasts very differently, but they were able to get darker for that bean temperature. But we just don't like it; it doesn't taste good. And so we explain people to that, like that's what it is. If you really want that, then these guys over here do that roasting, but we don't do that. And so I think then what happens is we'll say to people, we'll try this instead. It's not as dark as a roast, but it's a rich, great Komodo dragon, whatever. They'll try it. I'll be like, well, that was great. Wasn't, and then usually what it says, like, it didn't taste as like, they're like rubbery, like burnt, whatever. And I was like, well, yeah, because it's a lower temperature. But we feel like we're trying to show people like you can go lower in temperature, still get all these great flavors. And not to the people that take it much higher. We just don't like it. We don't enjoy it. And so that's how we differentiate ourselves from other coffee roasters.
Nice. I love it. You kind of touched on something that I know this wasn't a topic necessarily we were going to cover, but it's something that I've been thinking about a lot, which is that people do like dark roasted coffee. I think it's like a feeling of nostalgia, or it's like the sensation where they maybe grew up and their parents drank this dark roast coffee, and they kind of always remember smelling it in the house, and we're so closely like connected with our memory of scents, and it's just this feeling of nostalgia. And also, like, me myself personally, I like lighter roast, medium or a lighter roast. I personally prefer that. But how do we as coffee professionals address that? So many people love a dark roast. I guess this isn't really a question. It's just something that's been on my mind a lot lately is if that's what the people like, how can we blend specialty coffee into having dark roasts that reflect that nostalgia that people have been thinking about while still maintaining the characteristics of the bean?
Yeah, I think that's a good. I think the first part of the question is why do people drink like that? And I think it's because when it was first started with Pete's and then Starbucks, like it was a way to roast, right? But it's not very. I think if you were to look at the roasts all the way through, the 20s and the 30s and the 40s, right? It was kind of roasted to 1 degree, which is just this is what coffee is. And then they
Uh-huh.
went to this darker degree, which people then said, oh, okay, wow, this is this. Maybe it's just a combination of it moving. I mean, like you have what fifth wave coffee, whatever they call it now, right? You have different types of machines now. So you have a loring, right? So a loring doesn't take it as dark; they just do it longer. So that'll give you a different flavor as well for a dark roast coffee. I think it's the same thing with like a medium roast. What we've kind of understood is like a medium roast can be anywhere from like a bean temperature of 408. That's still a medium roast, right? A light roast is going to be before that. But there's all these, it's just I think maybe the nostalgia comes from they didn't have that cup, right? That first cup. And it's just what we've been
Mm.
force feeding onto marketing and everything else is that it's got to be this dark roast. And I think it's just showing people like it doesn't have to be that way. You are going to have a group of people who are always going to want it that way. And, that it's like the guys in the Navy, they'd be like, it's got to be thick and a spoon sticks up in it. And I'm like, that's disgusting. Like, also wash your cup. That's kind of cool too. So I think part of it is it just has to be, more introduced into it in an environment that um, people can try it and they can ask questions. Because really, what it comes down to is people they're scared to ask questions, right? Because they don't want to look stupid, so they don't ask questions like, oh, it's this. So I think it's just going to take maybe time. Maybe it's already been time. So I don't know.
I love what you said that the people are maybe afraid to ask questions. I think that kind of alludes to this, still feeling of like coffee snobbery,
Oh yeah,
or maybe
no,
it's a little
yeah.
bit of a
We find that all the time. We find people all the time. Well, they're like, oh, my husband's a coffee snob, and I'm like, no, you just might like regular coffee. You might just like different coffees that taste good, that aren't just the same stuff, time and time again. So I think part of it is also talking to people when we interact with people. We got 2,600 people going through the door, and we're talking with them. It's just getting people to try stuff and then say that's a medium dark, and they try that and they go that's delicious, right? I forget who it was. They said if you go out, you got to get the coffee in their mouths. If they drink the coffee, they'll buy the coffee, and that's what happens. And so you explain to them and so there's an education part that has to go with it, and I think I think that's the only way that we find that we can get people to like, hey, go try this. And then they're like, that's amazing. And you're like, yeah, because it's not the same stuff. So,
But that's funny. How interesting. How to make coffee approachable. That's probably one of the things that's missing throughout the different markets is how you relate to the local market, to your local community in terms of approachability and getting them to have that one cup.
well, yeah, because I mean, let's face it, the way that whoever, and it's not SCA, but how they figured out how to do with the different pieces, parts, and the stuff, and so they've changed all of that now to how you approach it. But the approach is still going to have to be the same, right? Like, is the customer really going to look at my bag and be like, "Oh yeah, jackfruit. That's really what I want in my coffee." This I don't even know what jackfruit tastes like. I'm like, so it
Hmm.
has to be like, so you still have to use the sensory words, right? You still have to be able to explain it, but in a way that doesn't like, oh, I don't, and so that's just, I think you're right. I think it's getting it in a way that people can relate to it, and I think, I don't know. I think sometimes it goes over the top. That's just what I think. So
I like that. When you said a jackfruit, I can't even picture a jackfruit in my
kiwi
head.
zest. You're like, what? It's like kiwi, but you zested the fuzzy part of the outside. I'm like, I don't.
I don't think people do that.
This goes great with like, like, why would I eat that with this? Like,
Uh-huh.
why would
Oh, that's a good
uh,
Oh, that's a good one. I love it. Okay, well, let's see. Coffee nerding aside, profiles aside, there's this whole other part of coffee that I think a lot of us can share, us coffeepreneurs, is about building a coffee company in a bootstrapped way, building a coffee company without a huge budget. This is something that a lot of people struggle with, and they have their resilience and they have their perseverance, and they go out and they build something great with intention and purpose even without having to put a large budget behind it. And I want to know more about your story and more about your entrepreneurial journey, trials and tribulations, and how you've ended up here.
well, I think I quit my job, and so we've got 4 kids. So I mean, we kind of knew the numbers were working, but I I think to answer your question, we didn't in the beginning, right? Because in the
Okay.
beginning, when you have a salary come in, a W-2 salary, you can spend lots of money. So you can make lots of decisions and buy lots of things and do stuff that maybe you're like, I shouldn't have done that. And we did that in the beginning because we had more money than we did time. And then, so when we shifted over to me doing this full time, my wife teaching, and then, our kids have gone off, then, you realize you have more time than you do money. Building a coffee brand, takes time, right? So the internet wants you to believe that you can do this and instantaneously. Like, there's a possibility, but at least what we have found is the only way that works is you have a large amount of money that you're able to go and put into that. Because selling online is tough, and selling to human beings is difficult as well, especially if you don't have a marketing background. So you're learning as you're going and finding what works and what doesn't work. And then I think the thing that really helped us to hone in, our ability, because I would say the number one key for us bootstrapping that we finally figured out was how fast we were able to pay ourselves to get the next pallet of green available to purchase and still be able to make money, because that's your biggest outlay, right? So it's, what is your turnover time? So once we figured out our cogs and we were really, really tight on those and we understood where everything was going, then we were able to really hone in profitability for the company. Our company is debt free. We've been profitable now we've been profitable, but we haven't been debt free. We started that this year. And so I've been able to actually take, a salary. And so that's important for us, but you can't do that. So you have to still do that with growth. So you have to figure out how to get your green to pay yourself. But then, okay, what am I going to do next? And really what that came down to was staying focused to our yearly goals. Our yearly goals this year were for us to increase our subscriptions by 10 for the subscriptions that we have online, and to get our name further out there to our 25-mile radius that we're working inside of, and do that in an efficient manner that didn't burn through lots of money. Because for a while, we were paying, I think, $1,200 a month for Google ads. And then on top of that, we were paying for extra marketing inside of Wix. So you're looking at $2,000 that you're spending. But if it's not inside your budget, but you just want to see what this does, give you an idea. The idea is that it's difficult, and it takes time. And so I think that's where, how we got ourselves to be in this position where we are now, especially with the volatility of the green coffee market. because that does affect, right, how much you buy, when you buy, and and it drives choices that you have to make. I think the other thing is, like, you can't go for the shiny machines, right? Like, those shiny machines are great and they're beautiful, right? But I'm like, that says that's $120,000, right? But I think what happens is when we make our business plans, we're all saying, like, okay, we're gonna have 200 people through the door. Their average bill amount's gonna be this one, this one, this one. You put it up in front of someone, they say, sure, we'll give you a bunch of money, but those numbers really aren't real, right? They're on paper. And so you also have to be very honest with yourself when you're looking at your revenue and being like, that's how much I made. That's not how much I want to make, but that's how much I made, and not trying to say, well, I have more here, because you don't. You got to live within reality in order to get yourself there. And then when you got that machine, it's paid off, you run until the wheels fall off, or you realize that you're so far outside of capacity that you have to get a machine. Um, so I think those are the things that made us successful. They continue to make us successful moving forward. Um, I do think there is a caveat to this, and the caveat is, if you go into coffee roasting, but you build the plant in order to feed like a Costco or an Aldi's, I think you can do it from the beginning and do it well. So now you need a large amount of money, but I think if that's what you plan for and you push it out and you build the thing and you do it all, I think you can do it, and I think that it would be very profitable for that company further down the line, because there are lots of big players that are making a lot of money in coffee roasting. So,
Different business model, though.
yep, different business model.
Your statement there made me think of a follow-up question that I bet a lot of our listeners might be interested to hear. What have you found is the best coffee tool that you've used that is budget friendly?
Roaster tools. So roaster tools is we picked that program up 3 years ago. What I do like about it is it's integrated with ShipStation, and it's also integrated with Wix. So all of our orders, and so roaster tools is mostly for wholesale accounts. So we use that for our wholesale accounts, but your other orders all feed into the e-commerce, which feeds into it. So it projects your roast, how much coffee you have to roast based off of your inventory. And then it helps to also show you what your profit margins are when those orders go out. And so seeing that every time and understanding, like, okay, you have to weigh the coffee afterwards to know how much loss you have so that you can make your numbers, is another great quality assurance tool that roaster tools kind of forces you, because you have to put in what the loss is going to be. So so it tells you this is how much you have to roast. That's been the number one, like, game changer for us. It's very efficient. It forces us to be more efficient. What it also does is it forces us not to run the machine when we don't have to run the machine, right? So if we don't have something pulling telling us to roast, then we don't roast. So we wait, and then we wait for the order to come in. And then once that order comes in, it's just a lot more efficient for us out the door. And it gives our wholesale customers all their invoices. We can pay for everything online if they want to. It's been great. So I would highly recommend for roaster tools. We tried Cropster. Cropster's expensive, and like, when you start to look at the enterprise amount for what we were doing, it just wasn't it was not, it just wasn't for us. We were just like, this is too expensive. Roaster tools is geared how much you're roasting, but it's I think right now we're roasting somewhere around 800 pounds a month, and we're paying, I think, $90 a month for it. So it's very affordable, and it's a time saver. So we love roaster tools.
Awesome. Glad to hear it. Always looking for recommendations within our network in the coffee industry. And for all of our listeners who are also probably thinking of what could I use instead of Cropster, I'm sure that there's a lot out there who are in a similar boat. Maybe they'll be able to check that out.
Yeah, good, awesome.
Well, Jonathan, I have a final question for you. If some of our listeners ever find themselves in Mystic on a nice little getaway or nice little vacation, or somewhere else in the Connecticut, Rhode Island border area, how could they try your coffee? How could they learn more about your coffee?
So we wholesale coffee to a bakery called List Bakery in Stonington, LIS bakery. It's right across from Engine Room, so they can get our coffee there. Kitsch carries, they can't try coffee like right there, but if they go to Kitsch in Old Mystic Village, they sell our coffee there as well. If you stay at the Mystic Mansion, or if you stay at the Steamboat Inn, which are two hotels in downtown, they serve our coffee at breakfast, so you can get it there, and then you can just come by. I mean, a lot of times we've had, if people are coming by, we know if we're roasting or doing whatever, then we're like, hey, you want to try some coffee that I just made up? So you can come try it there. You can't buy it, but you can try a sample of it. We always have people come by here. You can stay at our Airbnb. There's coffee up there from us. So, so, so I mean, those are all the places right now you can get it. We ship all over the United States, so we're very versatile in how we can get coffee to you. Oh, last one, we also sell on a platform called Healthy Plant Eat, which is an online farmers market. So we deliver that to Niantic to Rosemary on Saturday, and then that goes out all over the state of Connecticut. The last place is you can go out to Fisher's Island. You can go out to Food Arts Cafe. That's run by Robin Taldo, and she has our dark roast out there for cold brew and for hot coffee. It's a great little trip if you want to go see a barrier island right off the coast of Connecticut.
Nice, amazing. I've always had my eye to go out there and visit. As a Connecticut native myself, I've always had that, like, seen it on the map, and maybe one day I'll go out there and be able to try your coffee.
Yeah, well, that would be great.
Awesome. Well, Jonathan, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for this conversation, for your insights, and for being a part of our coffee journey.
Well, thank you very much. It was a great time.
All right, Jonathan, talk to you later.
All right, bye.
Bye bye now.